G'day everyone. Just making a video about the latest bill to be passed through our parliament in Canberra. How they have just passed last week uh, a digital ID bill and what that means for us in Australia and what it's about a little bit. Now, I would imagine that many people are not even aware that this was passed because the mainstream media didn't see fit to really cover this too much. It's out there, but it's not like it's front page news like it should have been. And this legislation was a major milestone in Australia, moving us towards being having everything digitized, our IDs and our bank accounts, our health care, our vaccination status, driver's license, passports, all this type of stuff, uh, where and then it would lead to that. I believe these people are hoping eventually leading to digital cash, and so everything you do will be monitored and you can be tracked better. And it's been put forward in a positive way that it will cut back on certain criminal activity and so forth and what have you. But the payoff is that people in Australia will begin to lose some more of their freedoms, and it's going to be uh, eventually it will be used by our governments for controlling people more, and there will be less privacy or no privacy eventually if this was to be ratified the way that they want it to be. Now, the thing that was really bad about it is that there was no debate about it. It's no like let's put this before Parliament and then we'll debate the pros and the cons of it, and then the politicians will get to vote on it. None of that happened, and even the recommendations to make it a little bit better than what the legislation that's now being put on the table would be to protect privacy, they were all dismissed, and they didn't have to try and put their case for this digital ID forward. It was just pushed through very quickly without consultation with the public. Most people in Australia, I would gather, if I was a betting man, I'd put money on it. Most people don't even know that this was on the table. I've never really heard much about it. But here we are. We have now gone and passed this legislation for this digital ID. And this ID is not going to be a good thing for Australia overall. No matter what they say about it, if we go down, I'm just going to go down this thing here, and the senator for the One Nation, Malcolm Roberts, this is what he said, that the digital ID law is the most significant legislation he's seen in his time in the Senate. All right, so he begins to talk about it a bit. He says that through this ID, every Australian will be controlled, corralled, exploited, and then gagged when they speak or act in opposition to the prevailing ideas or ideology. Uh, that this also ties in with this misinformation, disinformation bill that's being pushed through, so that soon your rights to talk about certain subjects will be considered to be breaking the law. So we can see this all sort of ties in with one another. And Mr. Roberts said that life is about to change for Australian if this becomes the way of life here in Australia. At the moment, they're saying it's voluntary, that it's not compulsory, but ultimately it would be compulsory because, as he says rightly, that you'll need this digital ID to be able to access certain government services, banking services, travel, major purchases for a house, I suppose, or a car even. You're going to have this digital ID. So by default, people will be forced into it. It's the first step in a wider agenda, according to what he's saying here. And, they will be able to track many of our uh, what we spend on, what we do, where we're going, in a way that they've never been able to before. So we already see this happening in communist China and places like that, where they have a social credit system where you get certain credits given to you, and everything there is already pretty much digitized, and you can't travel without your digital ID. You can't really spend without having your credit card with you, and you can't even get on a bus and so forth. And in a communist country, you don't have the rights and the freedoms that we currently enjoy here. So if you say something or do something or support something that the government considers is against Chinese communist regime or their ideology, then you start to lose some of those social credit points. And two, where you lose the ability to be able to use your ID or your funds that you've got in your bank account to do anything. They will block you, they will shut you down and make sure that you can't use it until you fall into line. And that's the concern, that this was lead to this here in countries like Australia. Now, people say, yeah, look, we're not China, we're Australia. But unfortunately, the current crop of politicians that have risen up in the world in so-called free democratic countries are beginning to manifest and show tendencies that are very dictatorial. Think back to COVID. Lord, look what they did during COVID, where our basic human rights were completely taken away from us. We were locked in our homes, completely healthy people were locked in their homes. We're told it was illegal to step outside your door except for essential reasons. We're allowed 1 hour exercise. Many of us weren't allowed to go to work. We were basically then forced into taking a vaccination we didn't want to take. Again, remember, they said that was voluntary, but if you didn't take the vaccination, most people would have lost their jobs. You weren't allowed to go into restaurants and clubs and sporting and entertainment arenas and things like that. And people were pressured and intimidated and basically pushed into a corner to comply. And that would never have happened in a democratic country 10 years ago even. So we see that these type of things are happening. And the World Economic Forum is a organization that meets every year, and they have an agenda called the Great Reset. And by the year 2030, they would like to see all this stuff in place, where there would be no cash, the digital ID would be in place, where we would have, they're even talking about 15-minute cities where you wouldn't be allowed to travel more than 15 minutes drive from your home. That the freedoms that we currently enjoy would be curtailed to a great extent. And this digital ID that is being implemented in Australia is part of that agenda. And so we're starting to see these things come about now in a way that would have been unheard of in years past. And there's a very real danger that this will be misused. And of course, it also sets it up that when everything's on digital IDs and digital cash, that you're going to be open for scams. And if the internet goes down, you won't be able to access your cash, won't be able to access your documents. Also, you're liable to be hacked and all of your information be stolen, and your money being stolen out of your digital accounts. It's much more easier to do that you won't be able to use cash anywhere because it'll be gone. And as we saw what happened in Canada in 2022, is that when those truckers that were protesting against the vaccine mandates over there, after all the stuff that went on with COVID, they had a big protest. And what happened when the government had enough of them doing it because it was effective, and it was they weren't able to stop it from happening, rather than come to the table and try to come to some sort of agreement and see how they could work through this and take it to a legal conclusion, they just decided to change the rules and shut down all the banks of the people supporting it and the people that were involved in it, and basically froze their bank accounts. And that's where this could lead to. So if the Canadian government has already done it, we would be naive to think that the Australian government wouldn't at some point feel that they would be justified to do that if people did something that they didn't agree with. Look what happened when we had the freedom protests during COVID. They were, people had the right to protest for the Black Lives Matters movement during the COVID period. Thousands and thousands of people in every capital city of the nation went out, and the governments let it go. And then right at the beginning of COVID, even though we were technically not allowed to go out, we're all in lockdown. And then when they tried to do the same thing for protesting against the lockdowns, the police and the governments of every state came down on them like a ton of bricks. So we need to be aware that the foundations and the ideas of democracy are shifting in Western countries. We may not be anywhere near China, the Chinese Communist Party's way of doing things yet, but our leaders are starting to move things in that direction. And that brings me right back to what the Bible actually says in Revelation 13, where it talks about two beasts rising up. One's a political beast and one's a religious beast. And I'm not going to read the whole thing out to you. Have a read of it in your own time. But go and have a look at the end here. And it talks about that this beast will force everyone to take a mark. And anyone that doesn't take that mark won't be able to buy or sell. And, there's lots of different theories around what that really means. But you can see that if there's a digital ID and a digital cash society, and all these things are working in the nations around you, then if you step out of line, you won't be able to buy or sell. And that's what happened to those Canadian truckers. They couldn't buy or sell because they couldn't access their bank accounts anymore because they had been locked out. So we need to be aware that what the Bible spoke about thousands of years ago is coming true in front of our eyes. If you have never got yourself right with the Lord, if you've never read the Bible for yourself and taken any notice of this because of whatever reason, then now is a good time to start studying the Bible and reading the Bible for yourself, and also looking into these things and seeing what's happening around the world now, because the Bible is coming true before our very eyes. And I'd also take you to another part of the Bible, which is Daniel chapter 2, where what Daniel was recorded was a vision for a prophecy that would it wasn't a prophecy, it was a dream that King Nebuchadnezzar, the dictator of that time, 2,500 years ago, roughly, he saw a dream of all these world empires coming, and then at the end, the kingdom of God would be set up after these world empires would rise up. And if you look at this, it talks about the king of Babylon, then it talks about Persia and Greece and the Roman Empire, then the breakup of the Roman Empire, which I believe we're living in now, coming after the king of Babylon. Now, the first two empires happened in Daniel's day, but the Greek Empire and the Roman Empire, and how it broke up and has turned into basically Europe, what we see today, those things were yet to happen, and yet they were predicted before they happened in the Bible. So, and Revelation 13 sort of ties in with this. Yes. So just this week, Australia took that step towards having a digital ID system. And this is all part of Bible prophecy being fulfilled. Christians have for centuries now, and ever since I have been on this earth and gone to church, been talking about a time where there will be one law, one government, and one religion, and that people would be controlled, and you wouldn't be able to buy and sell unless you were part of the system. So, until COVID came, I was, wondering how these things would happen in a free society like Australia. But since then, all these things we see happening, it's now we can see that how it can happen, and that the governments of our nations have the will to make it happen. They would like to see it happen. Anyways, that's just a quick update. If you haven't heard about this, then you need to ask yourself, why isn't our media making it known more, or keeping our governments honest on this and asking the hard questions? It's only the small independent media and ordinary people like myself that are actually asking the hard questions, and politicians that are from the independent groups like One Nation, the United Australia Party, and some members of the Liberal Party that are asking these questions. Labor, the Greens, and even many people in the Liberal Party, unfortunately, are going down this path. So, anyways, just for your information, look into this and get yourself right with the Lord, because the only thing that's going to turn this thing around is God sent his kingdom up ultimately anyway. God bless you and have a great